right, we are here. It is the top of the hour. Thank you for joining America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host this hour, and quite frankly, since it's my show, every hour. It is 7:07 on the nose, and we have been joined this morning by a couple of friends of ours. You know, yesterday we talked about this Morningland Dairy issue. I talked about it the day before that, and it's really important that you guys have an opportunity to recognize what transpired here and what was done with this Morningland Dairy. The Milk Board here in Missouri has basically abused the life out of these folks, and we're going to have them kind of come on with us this morning and talk a little bit about what actually transpired, what their experience has been, what they've been through in the past 2 years, because this thing has really devastated them. It's devastated their family. It's destroyed their farm. It's put multiple people out of work. And I think it's an opportunity for you to hear directly from the Dixons. So good morning. We are joined this morning by Joe and Denise Dixon. They are the owners of the farm. And Morningland Dairy is based out in Mountain View, Missouri. And so good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Bring that mic in a little closer to you, and you guys will be just fine.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Thank you for coming and spending the time to come in and join us this morning in the studio. You guys have really been through the mill in the last couple of years, and I think yesterday was the climax of that. And I'm hoping that this is the end of your legal troubles with the Milk Board, the FDA, the USDA, and the court system. They came yesterday and removed some 36,420 pounds of cheese from your farm and destroyed it. And this is the culmination of a multiple-year problem that you've been fighting and dealing with these groups. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a background on what's happened? Denise, why don't you kind of... Both of you pointed at each other. This is radio, guys. You know, unless you're watching the streaming, they both looked at each other and pointed at each other. You take it. No, you take it. Denise, maybe you could kind of bring us up to speed.
You mean from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, you just give us the brief 30-second story of how this kind of came to pass.
Well, we feel like we were manhandled. There was an agenda. They came in, and am I not talking close enough?
There you go. There you are. You can move that mic, boom.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, they came in and told us that there was a problem. We tried to we thought that they were dealing with us to work it out, but we realized in very short order that it was part of an agenda, and we were simply being crushed.
Yeah.
And
this started with cheese that you had sold. Now, you sold cheese, your cheese that you manufactured, and this is raw milk cheese, people. For the record, let's just kind of set the pace here. This is raw milk cheese, which means that the milk boards and the FDA and the USDA don't really like these particular types of farmers, because they want everything pasteurized and homogenized to the point where it is so sterile that basically, it has no value to you as a food or as a product. And so they had you folks have been making this cheese for some 30 years. You distributed it in over 100 retail locations, if I'm not mistaken. And then you, in addition to that, had sold some to a location or had a distributor in California. They had some cheese that was tainted. They traced it back and said that it was your cheese that was tainted. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Well, they said it was tainted. There's no guarantee it was ever tainted, because in California, they waited 55 days before they contacted the state of Missouri and said there may be a possibility of Listeria and Staph aureus in the cheese. Then the state of Missouri comes in and puts an embargo order on the door. From there, it's all downhill.
Right. So they basically put a padlock, if you will, figuratively or literally.
Figuratively.
Okay, on your operation, and they brought the USDA in, who then did
Actually, the FDA.
The FDA, I'm sorry, who came in and did some 99 swabs to identify whether or not you had Listeria in your facility. Am I correct? So
Yeah.
these swabs are like a gigantic Q-tip, and they basically go in and swab down the countertops where you make it, and they swab the drains out, and they swab under the corners to try to find maybe some hidden bacteria. Is that a fair
that's a fair assessment.
Okay. They did 99 of these swabs, and out of the 99 came back negative for their cultures.
Correct.
So at that point, the FDA kind of said, okay, we're hands off. There's nothing for us to do here, and we're gonna take a backseat role. Is that correct?
Actually, they let us know that they were finished with their
Investigation,
but that they might be back.
Well,
Okay.
they let us know they were finished with their investigation, but they said they didn't send us a letter. They didn't send us a letter. They didn't send us a letter until about 2 years later, year and a half later,
Yes.
stating that we were no
letter.
longer, that they had cleared us, but yet they could always come back if they needed to.
Sure. And I can understand that they do that as a standard practice, where they want to basically have the opportunity to at any time step back in and reopen the investigation.
If they need to, yes.
If they feel like they need to, right? So okay, so the FDA is off the case. They say basically, we're clearing you from our investigation. We have the right to come back in at a later date if we feel it's necessary.
Well,
Then
they still had the option. They had still come in, and they were the ones pushing for a recall. They told us we needed to do a recall. We had to do a recall, but on record they couldn't say we had to do a recall.
They said if we didn't do the recall, they would do it for us. So
they intimidated you into doing the recall.
Yes.
Which is standard, by the way, for federal agencies. You know, intimidation is the way in which they operate. You either do it our way, or we're going to force you to do it.
Well, they said they didn't have the regulatory power at that point in time to force to do it, but then they turned around and said you will do it, and then they, either the State Milk Board or the FDA one, leaked we were going to do a recall to force us to do a recall. And when we pointed out that, when we wrote a email out to everybody stating that we were forced to do a recall, we were pushed into doing a recall by the FDA, said we don't have the right to do that.
Yeah, they said it was
Wow.
So
voluntary.
they backed off.
Right.
But yet they still pushed us into a recall no matter what we wanted to do ourselves.
Sure. So the cheese was recalled from all of the distributors that you had, however much was out there. You got 100 distributors, so they brought it all back. You then brought it in and put it in this lockdown facility.
Actually, no. That most of it wasn't brought back. Most of it was consumed. We had many customers that said, "We're not returning our cheese. We love our cheese."
Okay.
We know what's going on here. We know the agenda of what they're trying to do.
I see.
We will keep our cheese. We want to keep our cheese. And
So out of all the people, post-recall, anyone who did not return the cheese, were there any reports of anyone becoming ill?
Never.
So
not in 30 years.
In 30 years, you've never had one person report that they got ill from eating your product.
No.
Interesting. Okay, so the FDA is completed their tests. The Missouri State Milk Board, where does this go at this point? The Missouri Board comes in and they have basically told you that you can no longer produce milk or raw milk cheese. Is that correct?
We actually had to dump our milk for 5 weeks before we could just sell it conventionally.
So wait a second. So you're milking these cows every morning, right?
Yes. Morning and evening.
Morning and evening, and at that point, instead of being able to make cheese with this, you've got to dump it because they suspected that there may be something wrong with it.
Until we got the FDA results back. Now, we couldn't even sell it to the normal chain to be pasteurized and homogenized.
Yeah, but pasteurization and homogenization will eliminate any bacterial content that would be in there in the first place. That's the whole point of it.
That's the whole point, is correct. But they told us we had to dump it for 5 weeks straight. We had to keep calling the FDA to finally get the test results back before we were cleared to sell to the normal conventional market to have it pasteurized and homogenized. So for 5 weeks, we had no choice but to dump this milk down the drain, eat the costs of it. Everything we had was locked up.
Right.
And so as the case continued forward, we ended up selling 16 cows to pay the bills for a month or two.
Gee whiz.
Now, Denise, I'll let you carry on as the case went forward on those 16 cows.
In my deposition, I mentioned to explain to them our that we were financially stricken, that we had to sell 16 cows. And during the trial, the Attorney General's office,
Jessica Bloom,
lawyer, actually it was Laura Bailey Brown.
Okay, Laura Bailey Brown.
Said, so you sold 16 cows because they were sick. And I said, no. I
Not
told
because
you.
they were sick, because we had to eat.
I said, in deposition, I told you we were financially stricken. And nothing further was said, but in the judge's judgment, that's exactly what he said, that we had sick cows.
We
Wow.
sold 16 cows because they were sick with no evidence whatsoever.
Wow.